Nissman, and I am speaking to you from my music studio here in beautiful Greenbrier County, West Virginia. Oh, how I wish we could all be together in the concert hall, and hopefully that day will happen sometime soon. But in the meantime, I thought it would be fun to revisit with you the music of one of my favorite composers. I consider Sergei Prokofiev to be the real giant of the 20th century. And I thought it would be fun to share with you his very first published work, his Opus 1, his first piano sonata. You know, Prokofiev was a child prodigy. I think he came out of his mother's womb playing the piano, but already by the age of 2 or 3, he was picking out melodies at the piano. He was writing compositions by 4 or 5, and even wrote an opera at the age of 9. But with his first piano sonata, he felt it was good enough to be published as his very first work. And it's a wonderful work. I remember the first time I heard this sonata, and I fell in love with it then. But you know what? It did not sound like Prokofiev. It sounded more like the music of Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky, Scriabin, a little bit of Liszt, some Brahms, some Schumann. Who could resist those composers all rolled up into one? And the pianism was terrific. And there's this youthful passion and wonderful energy to this work. And it's a sonata in one movement, and so, which means it's in 3 sections. And you remember when we've talked about the sonata previously, I said, well, the first section is the exposition with 2 contrasting themes, and then the development where everybody's fighting with each other, and then the peaceful return with the 2 themes coming back in the same key, and then usually a composer might throw in a coda at the end to summarize what's gone on. Well, with this sonata, it's textbook classical sonata form, and actually this sonata began Prokofiev's journey, his love affair with the sonata form, because he wrote 9 wonderful sonatas, and there's even a fragment of a 10th, but 9 complete sonatas. So this is where he started, and let me just walk you through it. I want to share this romantic composition with you. Prokofiev's voice is not really heard here yet, but you will hear the roots from where he came. Okay. a 15-year-old, is it? It's a wonderful piece, and I love playing it. I always like to start recitals sometimes with this piece because it's a great warm-up. And look at the pianism. At 15, he was such a natural, adventurous pianist. And of course, he built on the Lisztian romantic tradition. So at least now we know where Prokofiev came from. But then he, of course, developed his own voice. And I'd like to play for you 4 very short pieces. They're from his set of 20 pieces that he called Fleeting Visions, Vision Fugitive. And the title came from a poem by a good friend of his, Beaumont, who was talking about the fleeting visions, the iridescent colors, the rainbow hues. And what Prokofiev has done is, with each of these tiny pieces, they're very short, he builds a different sound world, and he takes us to a magical place. So listen to the opening and you'll see exactly what I mean. It's a different side of Prokofiev than you saw in the first sonata. Is put a melody under that theme and change it. And take us to a different key. See what I mean about a different sound world? Actually, it's very French. It sounds to me like a lot of what Debussy would have written. And here's another one where you'll hear that sharp wit of Prokofiev in the middle. That middle section is so witty, it's so Prokofiev. And then here's one of my favorites. I can't play all 20, but I'm going to play these next 2 for you. And the first one always sounds to me like a conversation going on. You'll hear one person talk and then the other person answers. And then he answers in a key, a different key. Back to the other person. And the answer. that say, oh, Prokofiev had such a cold, brittle soul. You really hear the depths of his imagination in these wonderful pieces. He was 24 when he wrote these. And now I'd like to play for you kind of a signature piece of Prokofiev. You know, one of his characteristics is this wonderful rhythmic energy. He calls it the Toccata element, you know, the idea of that energy that starts at the beginning and just drives right to the end of the composition and builds in momentum as it goes. Well, he did write a toccata, which is really a perpetual motion piece. You know, the rhythm doesn't stop. Once he establishes it, that's it, you know, and you have to take it right to the end of the composition. And I just pulled it out to give you a rough idea of this piece and really how it really did revolutionize other composers that followed Prokofiev. And it's interesting, Bartók at the same time was writing his perpetual motion piece with the Allegro Barbaro, but this is Prokofiev's version. love to practice that so much, and we need to practice that. So that was just a rough idea, and I must apologize to you for my out-of-tune piano, because my technician hasn't been here for a long time, and I just broke a string. Actually, I broke several strings. I have two pianos. There are broken strings on both of them. But we'll just have to use our imagination, and I'm sure Prokofiev won't mind. So let me now play for you another one of his pieces. It's the next opus number. The next opus number was opus 12, and he wrote a set of lovely pieces, and he dedicated each one to another friend of his. And this is the seventh of the set. It's a beautiful prelude in C major, his favorite key, because he could travel so far away from C major, which he did. And it's dedicated to a harpist friend. I think he had a sweet tooth for her. And so he's written this piece for piano and harp, so the harp can also play it. But you know what I'm going to say. I really prefer it on the piano. But it's a beauty, so let me share this with you. Used to play this as an encore after recitals, so it's a favorite of mine. And now let's go back to another one of Prokofiev's sonatas. And I would like to play for you the third sonata. It's also a sonata in one movement, and it was written 10 years after that first sonata. And now you can hear that Prokofiev has found his own voice, and he's also much more comfortable with the form. It's not like textbook form the way it was in the first sonata. You noticed the first sonata was so compartmentalized. It was very sectional. The transitions in this piece are wonderful. And you really hear Prokofiev's style. I mean, nobody writes like him. You hear the pianism, you hear this wonderful rhythmic energy, the wit, and you also hear the lyricism of the second theme. You know, so often this stereotype of Prokofiev has been cold, hard, brittle, and when you hear how he can write a beautiful melody, he really can melt your soul. I always think there's a soft teddy bear underneath all those layers, but he makes us look for it. So let me give you an idea. This is of the first theme. So it starts. Section is really, he exploits this rhythm, the dotted rhythm, and you'll hear that. Then he gives you a wonderful transition to this second theme with this beautiful melody, and it it's really lyrical and it'll melt your heart. Then he comes to the development, and then there's one passage that he writes that's so special because in the score he writes con elevazione. In other words, he wants the hand to come from high, and this is the way it's us to the end of the development, which he ends on this chord, all the white notes, and then he just wants the E to sound, and we're going to get back to that fast movement, and listen to the way he does it. There are no seams in this movement like there were in the first sonata where it was so sectionalized. So let me give you some idea of this sonata, because it's a real jam, very compact, one movement, and with Prokofiev there's never any filler. I mean, he says everything directly, concisely, with economy, and it's so well written, and it's so well written for the keyboard. You know, this is a composer who satisfies me on every level, emotionally, intellectually, musically, spiritually. So here's his third sonata for you. it's joyful music. You know, there's such a joy when Prokofiev writes, because it just flows from him. That was his joy when he was writing, and also he makes the pianist, you know, go through all the hoops. You know, the pianism is really very challenging, but it's wonderful. And I think the key when you're listening to Prokofiev for the first time, you know that adage, just follow the money? Well, with Prokofiev, it's follow the melody, because even with all this pianism around, there's always this wonderful melody. And you know, when I yelled out that second theme in the left hand, I just discovered that. Because he buries these wonderful mottos and motives. And isn't it funny, I've been playing the sonata for years, and I just made that discovery that that's where the second theme is. It was very well disguised, but that's the wonderful craftsman Prokofiev was. Now, let me just advise you, or recommend, actually that's a better word, if you want to explore Prokofiev. He wrote wonderful symphonies, piano concertos, piano sonatas, violin concertos, ballets, operas, and I think if you're exploring his symphonies, the most popular one and the place to start would be the classical symphony. And Prokofiev himself transcribed the Gavotte from that symphony, so I'll give you just a sampling of that. And in this case, I would say the transcription is not as good as the orchestral version, because you'll hear all the wonderful colors that Prokofiev has. He was a great orchestrator. So here's the Gavotte from the classical symphony. Oh, it's a wonderful movement, but it's much better with the orchestra. And to close, I'd like to play for you a very famous march by Prokofiev. It's the march from his opera, The Love of the Three Oranges, and then you will understand where I get the name of my record label, Three Oranges Recordings, and the foundation, the educational foundation we just started, the Three Oranges Foundation. It's my homage to my favorite composer, Prokofiev. So here's the march. joy that Prokofiev gives us in his music. So I would say, why don't you explore more of his music and make sure you share Peter and the Wolf with your children. That's a great place to start with your children. They all always love that piece. I remember I loved it. So in the meantime, please stay well, stay healthy, and it's been great fun to share Prokofiev with you today, and I guarantee you there will be more programs. And the more you listen, the more you will appreciate that wonderful soul of his. He had this wonderful joy, this natural joy in his music that that we need right now. So be well, and for sure we will see each other again soon. Thanks so much.